And welcome back to Mixed Media. We're back at it for another episode of your favorite podcast, your favorite weekly podcast happening every Friday at 7 p.m. And I'm really proud of Mixed Media. I'm really proud of how we've come along. It's been a while. I don't know if I can say it's a new podcast anymore, even though all our little marketing things say all new podcast. Maybe not so all new anymore, but still fun and fresh in my mind.
We started in March?
Yeah, something like that. So we've had
5 months? Yeah.
Yeah, 24. I think this is episode number 24. So, yeah, like five and so months. It's pretty awesome. I'd like to thank everyone out there who is watching for tuning in, whether you're watching in post or not. One thing I'll say is you guys who are on Rumble, you guys are really quiet, but you love our stuff. I've noticed, especially recently, an influx of people on Rumble. That's really awesome. So please let us know in the comment who you are and join our Discord. That's a cool place to interact with us. And yeah, we would just love to hear more from the Rumble crowd out there. And so with that, I guess we'll introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella. Remember to wear the hat today. Got that awesome logo, ariella.co. And yeah, Ben, who are you?
I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and a media composer.
And where are you now?
So I moved out to LA last week, although I guess so I'm living in Northridge, so I've been told that I can't really say, even though it's technically LA City, that there's a difference between the city and the valley. So I live in the San Fernando Valley, and it's called, you have to say that you live in the valley, not in the city, even though it's technically the city. So
is it for the honor of the people in the city or for the honor of the people in the valley?
I really don't know. I've just been told that I can't say that I live in the city.
Gotcha. Hold on. I've got my villain lighting going. Let me make that less. I have nowhere else to put this light but to uplight myself, unfortunately. But it makes me look a little bit like a villain sometimes.
Wearing all black doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how are you adjusting though? You haven't started class yet, right? Or anything like that?
Yeah. My classes start on Monday, so still trying to figure out where I am basically and all of that stuff. It's nice. Where I live, like directly where I live, is kind of a nice area, but it's kind of a weird mix of like urban and suburban. That's kind of hard. Not like anything I've seen on the East Coast.
Yeah, that sounds really bizarre. It's like LA's like this endless sprawl, right? Like that's just infinite. Yeah, it's an interesting place, and you're kind of moving there at an interesting time too. So
yeah, it's funny. I mean, I move out here, and then like the day after I got here, they basically announced that everything was going to be online anyway. So I'm out here for grad school, but doing it online, even though the school is literally like 10 feet away from me. So
the apple you cannot eat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're Mixed Media. We're a weekly podcast happening every Friday at 7 p.m. I don't know if I said that already. And we talk about art, anything to do with the art space.
Should maybe mention now that I'm on Pacific time that it's 7 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah, 7 o'clock Eastern. If you're on the West Coast, it's a little bit earlier. Just a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about art in general, whether it's art philosophy, what's going on, the news of the day, business, reviewing things, interviewing people. We kind of done it all at this point, and hopefully next week we'll have all three of us. There are usually 3 hosts on this show, and if we have all 3 of us next week, we might try out a new format. And what I want from our audience is to tell us if you like it, because the best thing that you can do for us more than anything else is to give us some feedback. So if you like the new format that's going to happen next week, just let us know, and hopefully we'll have all three of us to try that. And yeah, I guess I'll go on with my topic for this week. So this week I'll be talking about the beginnings of being a director. And it's actually one of those hard things that's very hard to learn because of two things. One, there's a million and one ways to do it. You know, there's it's not the most defined role. You know, if you're a DP, you at least know you're confined to the camera, right? Whereas if you're a director, you're directing the whole show, there's a million and one ways to go about it. There's not really one process. The second reason is because indie film directing is going to be completely different from what you'll find in the industry. I'm going to be coming at it from an indie film perspective. I've not done anything even close to industry stuff. And also, I'm not an expert, so this is just kind of my thoughts. And it really is a 101, and it's mostly about leadership is what I'm going to be talking about. It's I think the things about directing that are hardest to learn are the things that aren't actually the filmmaking itself, or at least can be harder to learn for some people, at least. So I kind of want to talk about those sort of interpersonal aspects of directing.
Yeah, it's interesting too that I think for film composers, everyone's always saying, and from a little bit of personal experience, like the act of composing is really only half of what you do. It's all these other kind of intangible networking skills, and then to get jobs, and then to lead the people who are on your team, or the musicians that you're working with. Those are things that are, I think it's kind of a parallel, skills that aren't as directly like based on creating art that are still really important to the job.
Yeah, if you're not able to work with a team, to get a team around you, if you're doing a collaborative art form, then it's kind of futile. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are. If you need other people in order to complete your project, then you're going to have to be able to deal with people well, or else it doesn't matter how awesome and creative you are. You will not get the job done. So yeah, I actually want to give a shout out to Scott before I started. Scott was on the show. He was a composer, been interviewed, and he gave me the idea for doing this episode. So shout out to Scott. I don't know if he's watching right now. It doesn't look like he would be. But shout out to you. Thank you for giving me this idea. If you want to give us some more episode ideas, just link is in the description to our Discord. All right, so I think the first thing is, what is the job of the director? Actually, I'll even backtrack it further, because this is a question I had before I even started to understand film, production, when I was just learning about film at the very beginning. It's hard for me to understand how the director fit in with the rest of the hierarchy of everything going on. If you look at a hierarchy chart, it may confuse you that the director is not the top on the hierarchy chart. But then everything seems to be underneath him or her, right? And I'll just explain that real quick. So a director can either be working for himself or working for another entity. So whether it's a person or a company or whatever, right? So you could be a contracted director, or you can be, this could be your own project, and that you are your own boss for. For a lot of indie directors, that's going to be you, right? You're going to be, for a lot of you, not all of you, that's going to be you. You have put the money together, you've gained the funding, maybe you have investors, but the way that you've structured everything, you've maintained full, majority status on your project. That's most indie films, I would say. Sometimes you are hired by a writer. So this happens obviously with crew, right? So you're more like crew in your relationship to the project. So recently I was director of photography on a production. and the director wrote the thing. So he wrote the thing. He funded the thing out of his own pocket. So he was the director at the top of everything, and he contracted me, the director of photography, to do the photography for the production. So that's more of your relationship. Now, if you're a director in that situation, you've likely been hired by a production company that's pushing you out to a project, or you've picked up someone else's script and you've pitched your vision for that script, well, whatever it is. I think less people are going to be in that camp because you're more towards the industry side of things, and I can't really help you. So the director, you'll often see is underneath producer. But oftentimes, if you own the project, you are also essentially a producer. And producer is a completely amorphous title that I'm not going to get into right now. Many people can be producers. Cool. So what is your job? If your title is director, you have a job. So you have two, I think, big things. Your job is to manage the vision. So manage the vision, whether it was given to you, whether the script was given to you, or it's your own idea. You've got to manage it. You are the manager of the vision, the abstract thing. And you have to manage the vision makers. In film, you cannot create a film alone. Well, you can. Yeah, well, I shouldn't say you cannot. You literally can, but you're not watching this if you're doing a one-man band sort of thing. And also, bless you, that's crazy. I've known people to do it, though, but it's insane. Yeah, so manage the vision.
It's really hard to do that with, like, actors, too, you know? You still have to, like, unless you're going to shoot yourself. I mean, some
people will even make themselves the one and only character as well. And that sounds really lonely, too. Not judging, but I think that would drive me insane.
It sounds difficult to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to check your own takes, your own performances in camera. I don't even want to think about it. It's giving me anxiety. But yeah, so you have to manage your vision makers. So the people who are going to be adding their own input. It's a multidisciplinary art form. There is music, there is sound, there is picture, there is wardrobe, makeup, hair. Like it goes on forever. Color, all of post-production is a whole other animal, you know. So like, it's a multidisciplinary subject, meaning you're going to be watching over many different types of creatives work in their wheelhouse for your vision, right? The vision that you're managing, which puts you in a interesting situation where you may not be the expert about something, you know, and you will not be the expert about maybe, you know, most of it, because I mean, most people can only have enough time to really soak in, you know, one aspect of that. For me, it's probably you know, the photography end of things, the cinematography ends of things, and the writing aspect of things. Everything else I can do, but I wouldn't hire myself to do it, right? Especially things like wardrobe and stuff like that. You know, I wouldn't trust me with that at all. So you're going to be in a position where you will have all the power over other people and their decision making, and you should have all the power. Let me be clear. You need to absorb and retain all of that power, but you're going to have a lot of other people who are more powerful in the sense that they know how to do the thing better than you do in their respective fields, right? They're more creatively gifted in those aspects. So that's an interesting dynamic, and that causes the forever wars between the director and the different aspects of filmmaking, and you get all those lovely dramatic stories of fighting between directors and other creatives. Okay, so where do we start? I'm going to start with leadership, and that's what this is mostly going to be about. And I think being a good leader means being about. I think being a good leader is more about yourself than it is going to be about other people. And I'm going to clarify that real quick. So what do I mean? I mean, you yourself have to be a good person in order to run a good set. That's where you start. It starts before you even think about the creative. It starts with how good are you at, actually, how well do you know yourself? That's the first question. Know thyself, right? So how well do you know yourself? How well do you know your strengths, your weaknesses, what you can and can't handle, where you're likely to have stress points when you're on set, preset, post-set, whatever. You need to know yourself very well. And this is actually very difficult, you know? I mean, everyone thinks they have self-reflection, right? But if you go and survey the world, you probably come to the conclusion yourself that not many people self-reflect well. Well, don't just stop there. Self-reflect even more about yourself, right? To help humanity out. So reflect on yourself. That's the first thing that you need to do. And you need to own your flaws, and you need to own your personality type or personality. You need to understand how you interpret information and how you communicate information. So for me, I know I have a tendency to speak when I am conversing with, you know, about anything really. If I'm having an important conversation, I get very technical with my words. So my words mean a specific thing to a point where I'll like backtrack and I'll like correct myself, you know, to be even more clear, even if it's going to be 10 times more verbose, right? I probably do that on this podcast. And so I know that, I do that, and I know that that's not always efficient, right? So I know if I'm on set and I'm asked to do X, Y, Z, then, and I need to make this decision right now, I know that I have to be careful because I may say X and it might acquire, because I'm being very technical with my language, when I say I need a half stop down on the exposure, right, or something like that. That's a weird example, but I mean literally I need a half stop down on the exposure, not expose me down to where I'm happy, right? Whereas some directors might not know what a half stop means, and they'll say, I want a half stop down, and then the DP thinks, I'm going to expose this down to where I think it should be, right? So I know I speak precisely like that. I won't use those words unless I mean them, right? So that's just a really example. So particulars like that, really examine yourself. Next time you're directing something for fun, or like maybe you're working on a set, really look at your own behavioral mannerisms and think about how they interplay with other people on set and stuff like that. Next, look at those weaknesses that you've assessed and start to work on being better, right? Like, you know, don't just leave yourself there and know your weaknesses. Try to fill those gaps. Start virtue building, right? So like, don't just be like, wow, I really suck at communicating. So I'm gonna worm my way around it. Well, yeah, you might have to need some workarounds while you're trying to get better at communicating, but don't stop trying to get good at communicating, right? Like, you know, you still need to, you need that skill still as a director, and you want the process to be as smooth as possible. Remember, the less time you're dealing with set drama, the more time your head is in your own world. I think this is the best way to phrase it. I can't remember. Some director said it this way. Basically that, you know, what a director always wants to do is be in the universe that is actively being created in front of him. And that is, I deeply feel that, you know. So if I'm on the set of Operation First Light, a film I worked on with Ben, I'd rather not talk to anyone, and I'd rather just focus on what's actually, you know, unfolding in front of me. And I want to be absorbed in my own world so I can make sure the vision is being taken care of while I'm there. The reality is that's not going to happen, especially on an indie production, 100%, right? And it doesn't even happen on professional productions, 100%. It's never going to happen. It's an unfortunate reality. You're going to have to tend to things that have nothing to do with the universe that you're trying to create, right? But you want to maximize that. So the less drama, confusion, all this kind of stuff that you have on set, the more you can sit inside your universe as you create it, which is where you probably want to be. So work on those virtues. So if you lose your temper, that is going to be a very important virtue to manage. You can't be losing your temper all the time on set. That's not okay. You will not get very far. And then keep going. Like, don't stop at, oh, I've solved my temper problem on set, but I habitually lie to my crew to get what I want done. Well, don't do that either, So continue on and recognize where your flaws are. Because if you're not honest with your crew, they will know. Like, you are not as smart as you think you are. You are not as smart as you think you are. Everyone can see through your crap. So don't be that guy without integrity. You are leading the ship. You want everyone else to be honest with you, so be honest with them. Obviously there's going to be like candor and stuff like that, but you're not going to like tell someone, I think you should quit your job forever. That's not a nice thing to say. But the honesty that gets the job done. Let's see. So yeah, that's all of that. So then we move on to, okay, now I am thinking about myself more. I'm taking care of myself more. But now I've got a date tomorrow. I'm waking up at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. To read the script again, and then I don't know, go through some ritual to try to make myself feel better before I see all the eyes looking at me, demanding that I know exactly what to do right now. When you're doing that, you're going to have to know how to deal with people as well. So not just know yourself, but okay, how do I know the people around you? Well, hopefully you've got a good amount of people around you who you know. So sometimes you have control over that, sometimes you don't. So as much as you can have control over that, I heavily implore you that oftentimes it's better to get the person on your team that you have confidence in as a person with integrity, that you know what they can do, that you can communicate effectively with. It's better to get those people on board than to get the person that's a little bit better, right? Obviously, there's going to be a balance, between, different interests, but really don't discount the fact that you know people, and you want a lot of those people on your set, as many as you can. But you're not going to know all of them. So as much as you can know the people who are on your set, make sure you care about them. That can't go unsaid. So like if you're in between projects, like, I don't know, like reach out to them or something, talk to people. It's good to keep in touch and keep on the same wavelength about life. So that when it comes to time, that you aren't completely different people to each other. Yes. So, what about other people? Acquaintances or people you don't know. So you might be a director and you have a sound guy who is just the local sound guy. You have no idea how to work with him. You have no idea really if he knows what he's doing. He's giving you examples, but that's never really assurance to a director, of course. You're always nervous. So what I would suggest is this is more of a me thing, the way I tend to do things. So you may not find that this works for you. So buyer beware. But I would pick a heuristic. So why heuristics are useful? They are heuristics because they allow you to try to tackle a problem quickly without going through the normal rigor of thinking about something and mulling over a problem, but get to a approximate solution. They also can backfire in many ways, but that's not relevant for here. But I would use a personality heuristic. That's kind of how I approach things. So, Ben, have you heard of personality types and things like that? I'm sure.
Yeah, like Myers-Briggs sort of things, or
yeah, things like that. Yeah. So there's plenty of them. There's Big Five, Myers-Briggs. I don't know. There's like the old ancient one. What is it called again? I'm forgetting it. There's like a really ancient one where there's 4 types, or 4 or 6, something like that. And there's a lot of debate about like, okay, what's the relative merit of these things? Well, we don't care, right? Because this is a heuristical thing. So it's not about, you're not going to use these things to type people actually, right? You're not going to like be like, you're this type, so I'm going to treat you like this. That's not what you want to do. That would be bad. You would be simplifying people way too much. But what it can do is help you to understand what might be the quickest route to a solution if you're in a bind. So I'll give you an example. So I like Myers-Briggs because of the way I think it's the easiest way I can graft people into different boxes. It sounds really weird, but I promise you it's for a good purpose. It's not to generalize people. It allows me to put people in different boxes, and throughout the years I've come to notice that these different places tend to very well describe very general properties of people, right? So there's the dispute about, okay, well, in psychology today, like the big five personality is the thing that is considered to be the empirically superior personality type thing. I don't have time to learn big five. I know Myers-Briggs, so I'm going to go with that, right? So, and so I first try to know myself. So I am an ENTP. I probably have been since roughly around high school, which gives me a certain understanding of myself. If I were to look at it literally, look at the different properties of ENTPs literally, of course, I would disagree with certain aspects of things, or things I would say, a little bit more, a little bit less. Well, I'm an individual, right? I'm not an ENTP unit, right? But I can recognize a lot of, if not all, of the weaknesses described in the ENTP subset. I definitely embody, right? And so I can use that to help put words to things I might not understand about myself. So I'll give you an example. So ENTPs are easily distracted, like we're squirrels, basically. And there's a reason why we're squirrels. But actually, before learning about my personality type, it would have been very difficult for me to describe to someone else what it feels like to be in my mind, which obviously is going to be hard to describe. You only know your own mind, right? Until you contrast it with like how other people describe their minds, and you're like, oh wait, I think very differently from you. My internal conversations and my internal home is very differently constructed than yours, which is fine. And I can say, it's not just that I'm a squirrel, because that's not really what it is. It looks like that from the outside, especially when I was younger. And again, we're trying to build virtue, so not trying to stay like that for my entire life. But I can definitely say that it's like that because of the way my brain processes information. So I tend to look possibilities as an explosion of possibilities of like, okay, I get this input, there's a whole bunch of association that happens, and then I tend to pick apart each possibility logically until I come down to something that I'm happy with, which might be never. So that is and this happens whether it's what I'm going to eat tomorrow or the deepest life quandaries. It's the same sort of pattern of thinking that just throws my brain into, I start with like, what am I going to eat tomorrow, and I end with the philosophy of culinary art and what I should be eating in a more abstract way, because I'm trying to get a solution to what I should eat tomorrow, right? So that's me, and that comes with a bunch of drawbacks. So I know that. So I would say, it's kind of fun too. So like, I would say, if you're going to go this route, find something that you can interpret very easily. I caution again against being overly broad with it, or just being too confident in your assessments, or anything like that. But you can look at that person that you will not have a chance to have a coffee with before you go on set. Maybe it's the AC or something like that, and the AC is freaking the hell out because the DP is throwing a tantrum and refuses to come on set, and the AC is like, I don't know what to do, freaking out, whatever, or something like that, or whatever the heck problem comes up. You've never talked to that AC, and unfortunately that's the reality sometimes, and that person comes up to you. Maybe you've observed that they're probably an INFP or something like that. And perhaps you can try to get in that person's mind and have empathy for how they're feeling and thinking in that moment so that you can soothe them as quickly as possible, both because you care about that person and also because you need to solve the problem, right? There's no way around it. So for that INFP, that might mean, say, listen, like, I know that you're freaking out. You're doing the best job that you can without the DP being here. I'm going to handle this because they are responsible for the camera. You do the things that you know to do, and then you go get coffee and take a break, right? That might be the right solution for the INFP. Whereas with, like, I don't know, me, I'm not going to be happy with that because I'm going to be like, yo, give me a solution now, or else I'm going to be freaking out for literally give me the step-by-step of, like, what exactly is going to happen, or else I'm going to be thinking about all the different things, and I'm going to be stressed the hell out and tired before we even start, right? Or something like that, just really random examples. And that could give you better communication and leadership on a dynamic atmosphere where you're not necessarily knowing everyone super well. Of course, you're going to replace those things with good relationships whenever possible, right? So there's that. So the last thing I'll go here with is the things that I think are the most important to do when you become the director, right? You don't become the director on set. Well, not normally, unless you're doing like some crazy fast-paced like commercial directing or something like that, and you're like replacing some director for some commercial shoot or something like that. But normally you're not just thrust into something, right? If you're doing something narrative, you've probably been working on it for, like, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. So you're not just thrust into it. So if you have a team, you have to do something first. And this is for yourself, and this is for the respect of everyone there, and this is so that they respect you. You need to have a conversation, you need to sit everyone down, and you need to set down the terms of engagement the first conversation that you have. The first conversation. You can't be having, I don't know, ambiguity about really important things about how you want to run not just your set, but the entire creative process. The set part is going to be like, a minuscule part of the entire process. It's quite amazing, actually, relatively speaking, how long each part of the process is. So you want to set those standards early on. So if you have producers working for you as a director, which probably a lot of indie producers or indie directors are going to have, or you have other organizational people like your AD, you're going to have your probably, other creatives early on board, like your composer or something like that. You want to sit everyone down.
It'd be great if you have your composer on early. Normally that's, especially in industry, that it tends to be like one of the last people you have.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. I like to have as many creatives that are going to be heading large departments on as early as possible, just to set the tone.
I think composers would prefer to be on earlier, most of them. At least I certainly would, but that's generally not the reality, especially like the highest levels who kind of like, unless you're hiring John Williams or, Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you bring everyone on board, set the ground rules first. For me, I highly recommend that the first ground rule you set is zero tolerance policy for what I'll call douchebaggery. I have a zero tolerance policy for people being bad people, and I mean anything from, abusing someone or touching someone inappropriately, anything in that realm, all the way to, I don't know, whether you I don't know, just habitually ignore someone who I've told you that it needs to be your partner in XYZ pursuit or something like that. None of that. And you have to be strong. Like there's no one else who's going to be responsible for what you do except for you at the end of the day, which is where a lot of the friction comes from on set, right? Because you are ultimately the one who has to answer for whether the film is good or bad, right? You can always say, well, I mean, I didn't really get a handle on this or that, but doesn't matter after you've spent all that money and time and it doesn't matter anymore, right? So really every decision you make is just paramountly important, which is part of the stress of being a director. It's extremely stressful. And I think a lot of crew need to understand how stressful that is too, to help the director as well. Sometimes, the decisions being made aren't not well thought out. They're just strong decisions, right? For whatever reason. And they still may be wrong decisions, but got to be a good director, right? So you've got to be strong. So zero tolerance on shenanigans, I would recommend, and set that tone outright and make it known that if you see a smidgen, a hint of that you are liable to go ballistic on them. So, whatever consequence that is available to you will execute, is what I would recommend with that kind of stuff. The other thing I would recommend setting a tone for is, because you are responsible ultimately for everything, I think that it would be irresponsible if you unduly handed over heavily creative decisions to your team without coming through you first. What the heck is the point? This happens. There are a lot of films where you can tell that it feels more like a collection of voices rather than one voice, which typically doesn't go very well. Like they're almost competing thoughts about what the central idea of what you're making is, right? So the easiest way to solve that is to just route a lot of that high-level decision-making through yourself. And that's going to make your time burden go up. And that's fine. That's your job, I would say that up front, because people are not going to know what you want to know or don't want to know. There are some directors who are like, don't tell me about that or I'll freak out or something like that. Or so make sure people understand the terms of engagement. So even if you're going to be that person who wants to know as little as possible and you focus on the things that you positively command, right? At least make that known to your top level creatives so that they can engage with you the way that you want to be engaged with. But I would recommend saying something like, if this is going to change the tone, the story, in any significant way, I want to know about it. And also make it clear that doesn't mean you're going to change it. That just means you want to know about it. That's all. You'd be surprised what people will change behind the director's back. I've seen it firsthand. And I always think to myself, I don't know if that's going to turn out well for you. Or maybe the director won't notice and it'll come out in final production that this does not quite align with the vision very well, and the director's not going to know where it came from, so you might get away with it, but it's better for you, right? It makes you look better, and at least you can always blame the director at the end of the day for being bad. And the final thing I would set the tone for sure is candidness. Like, a lot of artsy people are very sensitive about what they're making, which is, you should be, right? Like, you care about what you're making most of the time. So, you're going to feel a lot of ways about different things. And people are going to say things that are going to make you go, do you even understand what you're asking me to do? Do you even understand, like, what I went through to, like, get this story to be exactly this? And especially for directors, if you wrote the thing, you've been on this story for probably, it might be several years. The story has been in your head, replaying, and now it has to be manifest. And all of a sudden someone's being like, I think it's just not working this way. And you're going to freak out. And that's a natural reaction. But The better thing is for that person to tell you what might catastrophically ruin your film that you never thought about in the way that that person's thinking about it. So the better thing for you to do is to create an atmosphere where people are comfortable talking to each other and talking to you. If you don't do that, I think you're in big trouble. I've seen also that, where people just don't feel comfortable suggesting XYZ. I hope I haven't created atmospheres like that where people don't feel comfortable talking to me. But I try to say up front, you know, everything is game for telling me. You know, I'd rather you tell me than, you know, hold this in and it becomes like a problem for you, like you just can't get past this roadblock, or it becomes a problem for me too, you know, later, because I'm like, wait a second, that character decision doesn't really make sense. And accept that opinion from anywhere. So if your composer is telling you a story note, take the note, take it. You know, if your AC is like, you know, there's boundaries here, because obviously you don't want, you know, everyone talking to you, or else you're going to get information overload. But if your AC is like, I think this lighting doesn't match the way we did it yesterday, right? And I've talked to the DP, and he or she says that it matches what it's yesterday, but I'm really certain that the color is just off, right? Don't just immediately say, listen to the DP, get out of my face. Take it in, and maybe you're not going to go and challenge the DP directly. I wouldn't recommend that either. But you be the liaison, right, between the AC and the DP on that particular problem. You know, like, take those stances. This is much more applicable to indie stuff. With more corporate stuff, you may not even have the ability to talk to certain people. There are actually some union rules about who can talk to you about what, which is quite insane. But
Wow.
But yeah, it's
But like on set sort of thing, or like
Yeah.
does that extend into post?
I don't know about post, but I know there's some on-set rules about who can talk to what level about what.
Wow.
I'm sure that stuff gets broken all the time, but there's always this, you know, it's like a chilling effect over like whether you want to gamble or not, I'm sure, or something like that. But I would say if you're not bound by those things, ignore those things and just, you know, I don't see the point in stuff like that. Okay. So then the second overarching thing, I'm almost done here, is to recognize good behavior. My goodness, I see this a lot too, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it as well. Like, I just don't notice something, but make it your job to notice things. You know, like you know, a film day is 12 hours minimum. You know, a lot of times it's 12 hours. That's a long time, and a lot of people are giving it their creative all the entire time. Like, they're literally working their brain creatively for 12 hours. Like, if you can't find it in yourself to say one good thing about something that someone's doing and affirm them in something that they're doing, either you've got someone really bad and you've got really big problems on your hand, or, you know, you're probably not looking hard enough, right? And just make it your job to notice, because no one else will. You know, the producers are not going to. They're too busy. You know, heads of departments might be too busy. You are busy as hell, but you're the only person whose positive affirmation means literally everything, right? So, you know, do that. And the third thing is to be decisive, and with the caveat of what I said before, but also be inclusive, right? So be decisive, but be inclusive. Meaning, and this is something I can be really bad at. So, and that's partly because of the way my mind works. So someone will be like, we don't have this location anymore. We got to figure this out, right? And we need to figure it out within the next 10 minutes, or else we're going to be so off schedule you don't even want to think about it, right? That might be your AD talking to you, right, on set. Or even before set, you might be, you know, oh man, like you've been mulling over this story decision for the past 10 months or something like that, and you still don't have the answer, but you need the story to be locked. You need the script to be locked to proceed to the next thing. you really can't be ambivalent about these things. You can't let them endlessly eat away at you because you just can't. There's constraints. So be decisive and be specific. Be very specific. That's literally your job. So don't make the costume person come up to you and be like, I see you want period period wardrobe, but do you want that period wardrobe to be hyper realistic, or do you want to be sort of more like a fantastical version of the period stuff, right? And don't just say fantastical and walk away, right? that costume person might be very well happy to go off and do their own thing with just that little note, or they may not be, and they might be in crazy overload and might not be comfortable telling you that they're overloaded with all the decisions they have to make. If you know what you want, say what you want. So articulate it. I want just a little bit more elegant than the average person would actually have in this era, and I want more layers than they would actually have for depth of costume. And give me some color contrast between the set color and the clothing color in these particular kinds of scenes. And I really love the idea because I've really been thinking about this character in the color blue, and maybe I don't really know why, but I just always thought that this color blue really suits this character. And if they don't like it, invite them to tell you. So that's the inclusive part, And when they tell you, really think about it. Don't just say no. So yeah, that's the basics of the interpersonal aspects of directing. I think it's really just about managing the vision and managing the vision makers. And you have to manage yourself, that's control of self is probably 75% of the game. You have to know yourself well, you have to manage your stress well, you have to manage what you can handle really well, know your weaknesses, your what you're good at, and then you need to know how best you can communicate with those around you. And I think everything else, all the creative aspects of things, that's a whole other, how to direct well and directing actors and all that kind of stuff. That is a whole nother can of worms that we might open another day. So yeah, that's my segment.
Yeah, you're reminding me, bringing back some memories. I've worked on 2 sets, not related to like post-production composing. And first one was for doing sound on set for one of Irving's films. And then I also did some sound for another student short film. You're bringing back memories of that, and good things and not so good things.
Yes.
I'll avoid going into specifics, but not everyone understands that leadership as well as you do. So people out there listening, take note.
Yeah, I will also say that I was definitely a lot less thoughtful back then too. So I'm sure I made probably 1,000,001 I know I can even name mistakes, but that's what you should be doing too. Don't just think about your creative mistakes. Think also about what you said to that person in that one time. And was that really, were you being a good person is what matters the most, first and foremost. But second, was that the best way to go about things, And I have regrets. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe one day we have to talk about from the other end of that, from someone but beneath the director. I was just literally the other night watching the kind of infamous maybe not infamous, kind of, maybe I guess depending on your point of view, infamous or famous clip from the James Horner's TED Talk back in I think 2004, and he's talking about what's it like to score a major motion picture. And basically he says on there, discusses it for a while, but he says that most of the art is in not in writing the notes, but in artfully convincing the director that their vision is not as good as, for what their vision for the music is not as good as what you want, but you don't want them to know that you're saying that, basically.
Of course.
Yeah. It's a fun talk.
And I would recommend, I wouldn't just tell the director your vision sucks. I mean, I can imagine something that would make my day worse than hearing, man, your vision really is bad, But, also you have to say things too,
Right. Well, I think that's what he means by the artfulness of it. You suggest something else, and you kind of want to make the composer or the director come to like what you have in your head without them knowing that you're sort of like going against their own vision, but you're convincing that your vision is actually what they really want, have in mind. I think that's what he means. And obviously, Horner was one of the best composers of the late 90s to up to his untimely death. What I want to say 6 years ago now, 2014, 15. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another conversation.
But before we move on, I just, the last thing, this is a random pet peeve. If you have people working with you for free, you are in their undying, you are not working for yourself in full anymore. If people are volunteering for you, like, you got to treat every last one of those people, super well. And the least you can do, you have to spend money on your crew. I don't like just you have to, like, there's no way around it. And the reason why I say that is minimally, you have to feed them. It just, the thing that irks me the most is if there's a set and people are working for free and you are making them buy food, I don't know. It just, that just really irks me. Don't do that. Don't be that person. If you have to save $100 to feed everyone pizza, even if it's the lowest quality pizza, at least offer them that option, please. And water. This has happened to me. You have to bring water for everyone, not just yourself. Water for everyone, paid or not paid. This is part of the production process. If you don't have water, there's something wrong with you. So, yeah. Cool. You want to reintroduce the podcast?
Sure. All right, well, welcome back to Mixed Media. This is part 2. If you are watching live, we've been doing this for a while now, where we kind of record everything continuously and then split it up into multiple segments in post-production. So reintroducing it, if you've already been watching, if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome to our podcast. On this episode, we've already heard Irving Nestor talk about leadership as a director. And now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about a classical, not a media composer, a classical composer, Maurice Ravel, and some interesting things about him. So
exciting.
Yeah. So Maurice Ravel's a French composer. He was born in 1875, died in 1937. So kind of, at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And I would say, he's kind of a lesser known composer, and he's not like, if I were to mention a name like Frederick Delius, who's kind of his contemporary and very similar in style. Like Delius is truly a kind of almost unknown composer to, even a lot of people who are serious about classical music. Ravel is, kind of a mid-tier name. He's most known for his piece Bolero, which you probably recognize. It's got this one theme that just kind of repeats for about 18 minutes, and it just gets louder, and he goes through a bunch of different instruments and then different combinations of instruments playing the same melody and getting louder over 18 minutes. So that's his most famous piece. But I want to talk a little bit more about what's kind of some unique stuff about his music, in case you're not terribly familiar with him or not familiar with him at all. And for people who like listening to this for film music reasons, to get into some reasons why I think he's a cool composer to study if you aren't already doing that. So Ravel, of the French Impressionist composers, he's kind of the second biggest name. You're mostly going to hear, even in every college, or conservatory music history class, you're gonna study Debussy, not Ravel. Those are the two big French Impressionist composers, and Impressionism spreads out to England too, partially through a lot of I'd say Ravel more than Debussy, and Ravel's influence. So
That's
yeah,
actually the first thing I saw when I looked him up was his Impressionism influence is like the second search term or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of important. So what is impressionism in music? And it's a little bit hard to define, but people like Ravel and Debussy and Delius and the British Impressionists. Delius is one of the British Impressionists. They're really inspired by the stuff that's going on in painting at the same time. So they're looking at Monet and Degas, and they're kind of coming up with a musical version of that in a way that again, it's kind of hard to describe, but they're kind of generally, I'd say, what defines it. And this may not be like what the textbook definition is, if you pull out like a music history textbook, but I would say overall, they're generally taking like smaller pieces and trying to focus on like little images of something, give you kind of descriptive titles, and they try to do something that's kind of really well. Generally, they're all really colorful, which we've talked a lot about color and orchestration, and they are kind of not giving like a really clear. It kind of stands in contrast to like the big, heavy Germanic tradition of music, like Wagner. So they're gonna generally have melodies, but they're gonna be doing a lot of things that are more for color and effect than for just pure how do you want to describe this, like really clear lines and stuff. So we get lots of like blurry runs and things, or odd combinations of instruments, and a lot of non-functional harmony. So instead of like functional traditional tonal harmony where we have like one chord leads to the next, it leads to the next. We got a lot of things like planing where we have like a chord and then the same chord, but just like a half step higher and then another half step higher. And it's just because we want to dwell on that like sound of that chord. Things like that. Yeah, and just in general, use of like exotic scales, like whole tone scales. That's something that really comes about. Yeah, music in general through the through the Impressionists. Although we don't want to like ignore music history like most people do. A lot of really cool effects like that and other orchestration effects, which kind of get attributed to other composers, are actually first occur in the Russian world. Like the first real whole tone scale use, prominent whole tone scale use, was actually like 7 years before these people, like Ravel, in Ruslan and Ludmila, the opera by Glinka, but that tends to get ignored anyway. But a lot of these things are popularized by people like Ravel and Debussy. So that's generally what Impressionism is. It's kind of giving a kind of colorful but indistinct picture of something. Of course, it can be like done on a larger scale, like some of Ravel's pieces, but mostly that's what these pieces are. They're, short 4 or 5 minute things that have descriptive titles. And Ravel does a lot of that, like Debussy. Things like, a boat tossed on the waves, or the swaying of a decaying body that was still hanging from where it was like where the person had been hanged. Like pictures like that, and setting them to music. So some things that I think are really distinctive about his music. And you could point to maybe some of these things in Debussy too, but I generally just, and maybe I'm gonna take some heat from people, and you're welcome to criticize me in the comments or anywhere, but honestly, I like Ravel much more than Debussy. If anything, Ravel is probably my favorite in the classical, the strictly classical world. He's probably my favorite non-Russian composer. Okay, so what's distinct about Ravel's music? And some of it's a contrast to Debussy, but a lot of it's just things that Debussy does too, but I think Ravel does better. Ravel is one of the best orchestrators of all time. And it's not just like in his, understanding of orchestral color, which is fantastic. And if you want to understand what orchestral color is, just like put on Ravel, and you'll get it. And like compare that to, I don't know, something like, I'm not saying that Wagner is a bad orchestrator, but just listen. If you listen to that, you can if you listen to like something by Wagner and listen to something by Ravel right after each other, I think you'll get an idea of what I mean by like color, what musicians tend to mean when they say color, if you're not familiar with that term. But he's also so interesting because he not only, he wrote a lot for piano, and then he orchestrated his own works, and also pretty famously the Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. Russian piano piece that he orchestrated and quite famously. So not only can you just study his orchestration straight up, but you can study, the pieces that he orchestrated, whether they're his own or other people's. Take things that are not for orchestra, and then see how he gave them to the orchestra, and that gives you a really interesting window into how he thinks. Because if you just try and study orchestration, you don't see like the background to it, like in just a gigantic orchestral piece. You can guess why certain decisions were made, but it's much easier to see like, well, why did he could have had other options if he if you're looking at the piano score and you see like what his thought process is. So he does a lot of his orchestrations of piano pieces, which are just fantastic to learn from. Another reason why I really like him so much is that kind of in contrast to a lot of other composers, his melodies are really like, he has really, really pretty melodies, but they're not heavy-handed melodies. They're not the kind of thing that someone's going to, an opera singer is going to like belt out and it's going to sound like somebody's, some like massively emotional thing. Like they're really beautiful, and that goes for his textures too. In general, they're just really light textures, so it's pretty, but it doesn't feel massive. You're not like hit by a wall of brass. A lot of woodwinds and strings, and I think in some ways that's maybe his biggest legacy, which I'll talk about it in a minute. But in general, it's never overbearing. I never get exhausted while I listen to it. Whereas like Mahler, is a great composer, or Wagner, a great composer, but for me at least, after a while, my ears get tired of hearing like these walls of brass. And he's really a great example of how to make what you write for every instrument be totally natural. It might be really difficult to do, and sometimes in the his piano stuff, he would write things that are technically not playable, but he would include them anyway as like a kind of indication of what he want, like the general style he wanted, and like what you should aspire to, even if you can't physically do it. But in general, everything is really natural, and even on things that are not his instrument at all, they work really well. And also, I think his flute solo, which is actually a gigantic flute section solo, towards the end of his ballet Daphnis at Chloe. I think it's the best flute solo outside of the Russian world. I love playing it, so maybe that's my personal bias.
So how does oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, you can.
I was going to say, how does one acquire that skill of writing well for instruments that you personally don't know? So is it reading, observing? How does that work?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. So, you got to study those instruments, and study examples of things that are written for them. You also want to talk to players who play those things, and they're honestly the best source. And then I think it's also really helpful if you just try playing the instrument yourself. I mean, even just pick it up and see what it's like to hold a trumpet, and what happens and what sort of things, even to someone who is not an expert on it, seem like awkward on it. Yeah. So some other things about him, things that I think are important to note if you're gonna spend some time studying him, and I think are relevant to media composers, if that's why you're listening to this. He was really great at incorporating a whole bunch of different styles into his music. So they all, are generally under the blanket of Impressionism, and all of these things are distinctively in his own voice. There are lots of, he's got incorporating Baroque style, Rococo style, which is a really kind of specialized thing. And he's even got he studied jazz, and he actually George Gershwin went over to France and tried to study with him, and he basically said, "I'm not going to teach you because I'd rather have have Gershwin exist in the world than Gershwin try and sound like a bad Ravel." But no, but he's certainly aware of jazz, and he incorporates that. He also was a very good teacher. Not that he taught a lot of people. He was Vaughan Williams' teacher, and I've mentioned Vaughan Williams a few times on the show. So influence there. So he's a really, if you're going to study his music and listen to it, he's a really good example of how to incorporate a bunch of different styles while still retaining your own voice. So I would listen to that. And it's also really interesting to note how he responds really directly to the events of the world around him, which is not something that every composer did overtly. He was very, did a lot of commentary, musical commentary on especially the Second World War. The lead up to it, and then he actually served as a truck driver for the French military during the war, and then writing pieces for all of his friends who died during the war. So social commentary that way, without not heavy-handed political commentary, but musical commentary on what was happening in the world around him. So it's something else you can pay attention to in his music. So I guess so I'm just going to list some pieces in case you're not familiar with him. Some really great things I'd recommend listening to, and maybe we can throw some links in when we get this up later. So obviously I mentioned Bolero, which is his most famous piece. but I really cannot recommend highly enough his longest piece, the ballet Daphnis et Chloe, which was written for the Ballet Russe, actually. And I think it was kind of the biggest piece right of the year before the Rite of Spring. It's kind of an interesting contrast if you listen to that and then listen to the Rite of Spring. It shows you where music was in 1912 and 1913. But, you know, Daphnis and Chloe, like I said, best non-Russian flute solo. Just one of my overall favorite pieces, and really great pieces. Just listen to be absorbed in its colors. His string quartet is also a really great piece if you want to study natural writing for strings. And then a lot of his piano stuff, most of which he orchestrated, things like Les Tambours de Couperin, Mirars, Gaspard de la Noite, and then his orchestral piece La Valse, which is kind of about the end of the kind of end of French culture in the face of and also Germanic culture in the face of World War One. Those are all really cool pieces to listen to, and I highly recommend. And then just a few other things about why I think he's relevant to media composers. Again, if that's why you're here, he's got a really strong sense of musical drama. Even though he's, like I said, a lot of his pieces are kind of small pictures, capturing like non-moving things. He has a really great way of coloring these things and doing it really lightly without being heavy-handed. And I think in some ways that's kind of he's sort of a forerunner of a lot of more, not necessarily totally atmospheric, because he's not atmospheric. He's got atmosphere but also melody, but he's kind of a forerunner in that sense of more atmospheric music that still has that sense of drama. So I think that's another reason, that's a good reason to study him. I honestly think that, I know a couple of shows ago I mentioned that Max Steiner said that, if Wagner were alive, Wagner would be the greatest film composer.
I remember.
But yeah, but I disagree. I think maybe that might have been true in like 1930, but I think in 2021, if any, classical composer should come back from the grave and be a great film composer, I think Ravel would probably be the winner, just because of that sense of drama, and also just like having really beautiful melodies that are so light, they kind of can float through scenes and be really colorful. Is also a really big influence on Desplat, who's obviously a French composer. So I have to imagine that Desplat is listened to Ravel extensively. There are like overt echoes, I think, of Ravel, like Ravel's piano concerto, I think is a huge influence on Desplat's score for Little Women from, I think, 2019. I think that's pretty much, there's no way that it's not an influence, but just in general, in all of Desplat's music. And Desplat has that same sense of like kind of happy, lyricism, and these really light textures that are just kind of almost impressionistically painting scenes. And obviously he had a huge influence on Vaughan Williams, who has had a lot of influence on composers, including John Williams. And honestly, I think I can't say this is like a direct influence on John Williams, but I think if you want to look at some things that are sort of like they could have been influences if they were not influences on Williams' lighter fantasy music, things like Hook and the first two Harry Potter films. To me, those are very Ravelian overall, and just kind of light, not really like not brass dominated like Star Wars, but kind of nice floating melodies and kind of lighter orchestral colors. So he has, even if those aren't like overt influences on Williams, I think that you can get some of what Williams was doing if you listen to Ravel's music. So I think there's a lot of reasons why he would have been a great film composer, and why his music is really great stuff to study if you are a film composer and you are not studying them, and also not already studying him. And also, just I don't know, personally, I think he's a great composer to just listen to.
He's I've noticed also looking at the analytics around his name, I noticed that he comes up a lot alongside writing for strings in particular. So I don't know, I guess it's like a high demand topic, writing for strings in general, apparently. So
yeah. Well, I would say that if you're not a string player, which the vast majority of composers are not, and if you're going to try and do something orchestral, that's probably the hardest thing to do, because strings are so fundamental to the orchestra, and they are very different than piano, and require a very different kind of thinking than woodwinds. And I mean, I admit that writing for strings is definitely my weakness. So yeah, like I said, Ravel's String Quartet is a great piece to look at.
Cool. Is that it?
Yeah, that's basically what I've got on Ravel.
Yeah, so that's our good old friend Maurice. That's really cool, though. I guess we'll end it there. Oh yeah, news. I'll go first. This is not so much news as a big fat "I told you so." Go back to my episode on inflation. Go rewatch it. Absorb the information. Not financial advice, but absorb the information. I said the odds that everything that they're saying is right about short-term inflation is probably wrong, and I was right. I just got to say that. And I don't know. Maybe I should do a little bit more of that sort of like entrepreneurs sort of outlook on the future sort of things, ways to protect yourself and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't know. I'm hearing that it's still temporary, even though like months ago they were like, oh, in 2 months you'll see it in the data. I mean, it's like 5 months later, and it's still the same way it was, at much higher levels than I predicted it probably would be in that video. So I recommend that you protect yourself, and that you don't people have different motivations for what they do, which also means like the Fed has its own motivations for what it does. So don't just make your financial decisions based off of one data point, is all I'll say. If you've been in the stock market, you've been doing probably pretty well. And that was a major asset class I said to invest in to avoid inflation, because stocks get adjusted up with inflation. Ironically, riskier assets go up with inflation because their growth potential. And crypto's been doing pretty well too. So I just got to put that out there. Anything in the music world?
I haven't kept up with too much this week with the move, but I did notice, not music related, but I know it's kind of still technically an unconfirmed rumor, but it sounds like Disney is going to be renewing Kathleen Kennedy's contract as president of Lucasfilm. That's been on the news all over the place for the last few years as technically unconfirmed rumor, but it's probably not the kind of thing that once it's leaked, Disney is going to go back and say, oops, we're not going to do that. So,
bruh, I don't know how I missed that, but that's insane. That okay, well, my outlook on the film world has gone further downwards.
I mean, so I think your contract expires at the another few days, like sometime at the beginning of September, maybe September 15th. So
Everyone I knew was anticipating that she was not going to get renewed.
I know,
I
but
want
it
to.
seems they definitely can't. Like, even if they weren't planning to do it, even if they weren't planning on renewing it, there's no way that after that gets leaked, they're gonna like go back on it. Then they're gonna look bad in the media that oh, they gave into fan backlash or something like that. So
Those conniving. Oh, I have so many names for Disney.
yes, so who knows how much longer but it sounds like we're probably going to have Kathleen Kennedy continuing to head Lucasfilm.
We've got to suffer through this longer. Well, in the face of that, I say pray for films. And also, I don't know, just keep saying that you're mad at Disney. Say, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad. And I don't know, maybe they'll listen. I don't know. But, that is bad news for sure. At least if they went the corporatist route, they would stop offending people, even though they would still be terrible films. Like the pure, like, just Marvel minus weird stuff. Maybe they would get like a few more people to watch, but I think really what they need is a complete change in direction. And looks like they're not doing that. So, wow. Well, that's fun.
I can only hope that doesn't end up being true, but
yeah. Well, okay. I want to say something more positive. So, or at least just stop thinking about that possibility that I thought was not a possibility. So we are. Well, you want to go live on Rumble, but it costs money. It costs money to go live on Rumble right now. It's not going to cost money forever, so it's not the end of the world. It's a new technology for them. But I would love to get there live before anyone else is on there. You know what's really cool? If you search podcast on Rumble, like half of the search results are us. I just got to say that. Like, and if...
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. If you search like Scarlett Johansson, we've done like 3 videos that pertain to Black Widow in some way or another, and 2 of them come up on the first page. So, I gotta say, for those of you on Rumble who are pushing those views up and clicking that Rumble button and pushing us up in the rankings, I love you so much. But one favor I've got to ask for you, if we can get just one person to click on that locals link and become a member, I will absorb the rest of the cost of the membership that allows us to go live. I just want one backer, one person who will sponsor, and you will get a shout out. You'll get a lot of love, and maybe I'll. I can't. We don't have mixed media merch, but maybe I can send you a free Ariel hat or something like that. From me personally. But I would love you forever if for $5 a month you can go to locals and you can help us to get live on Rumble before everyone else gets it for free, and that way we can be the premier podcast, as we almost are on that platform. So I would really love that. And also, like, I just want to hear you guys. I don't think we've got anyone on Rumble on our Discord, even though, you guys seem to be loving the content on there. Our subscriber numbers, they keep ticking up as we release podcast episodes. So join us on Discord. We're friends. We talk about stuff all the time. I'm trying to talk about stuff more. I'm in the middle of post-production on a film, so I'm like, a little overworked over here. And then, here's another piece of good news. Almost forgot. I alluded many weeks ago. It might have been like more than like 2 months ago or something like that. Or maybe it's less than that. It was like maybe like 5 weeks ago or something like that. I alluded to the fact that I might be doing something cool with another podcast network. That has been confirmed. Ariella has obtained that contract with StarQuest Production Network. Well, I shouldn't say that. Asterisk. That's probably going to get cut out in the final podcast because there's no contract signed yet, so I shouldn't say that. But no official deal yet. But I've gotten a positive word from the CEO, and that also means that I'm going to be working on another podcast, not a host, of course, but doing marketing stuff for it. And I don't know, maybe there's a possibility of a cool thing happening there. We'll see. I can't promise it at all. I haven't even talked to him about that, but I think it could be cool. It could be fun. So yeah, I just wanted to put that good news out there. So with that, I think that's pretty much it. Have a good week, and if there's any link that you want, they're all in the description, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.